Emma Johnson stared at the crumpled $5 bill in her wallet one last time before entering the most elegant restaurant in Manhattan. At 23, this economics student had accepted the date with Connor, the dean's son at her university, hoping he would pay the check. But when she realized he expected her to pay to prove her independence, panic set in. $5 wouldn't even cover an appetizer in a place where dishes cost $50. As she desperately searched for an excuse to leave without embarrassing herself, she didn't know that at the next table sat Alexander Blake, the youngest CEO in America, who had heard every word of their conversation. What he did in the following minutes would not only save Emma from humiliation, but trigger a chain of events that would prove how sometimes fate uses the most embarrassing situations to make you meet the person who will change your life forever. Emma Johnson looked at herself in the mirror of her studio apartment in Queens for the last time before leaving. She wore the only decent dress she owned, a beige sweater she had bought on sale 3 years ago, and had done her best to hide the signs of exhaustion. She worked as a waitress at a pizza place in the evenings and studied economics at Columbia during the day, sleeping an average of 4 hours a night. The date with Connor Mitchell wasn't her idea. He was the dean's son, one of those rich kids who had never had to worry about anything in life. He had been pursuing her for months until she realized that accepting might help with her exams. Professor Mitchell was known for favoring those who socialized with the family. The restaurant, Le Bernardin, was in Midtown Manhattan, one of those places where a dinner cost more than what Emma earned in a week. When Connor suggested the venue, she thought he was joking, but he insisted, saying he wanted to impress her, and she hoped that meant he would also pay. On the subway ride, Emma checked her wallet for the 100th time, $5.20. That was all she had left after paying rent, utilities, and textbooks. Her mother, who worked as a cleaning lady in Boston, sent what she could, but it was never enough. Arriving at the restaurant, Emma immediately felt out of place. The waiters wore tuxedos, tables were set with silver cutlery, and customers flaunted clothes that cost more than her annual rent. Connor was already seated at a table by the window, dressed in a suit that probably cost $3,000. The approach was immediately wrong. Connor greeted her with a condescending smile, commenting that she was pretty for a girl from Queens. Emma swallowed her pride and sat down, hoping the evening would end soon. When the waiter brought the menus, Emma felt her stomach close. The cheapest appetizer cost $35. Entrees started at $45, mains from $60. Even bottled water cost $8. Connor ordered without looking at prices: tuna tartare appetizer, truffle risotto, salt-crusted sea bass, dessert, and a bottle of wine that cost more than her monthly salary. When the waiter turned to Emma, she stammered something about feeling slightly unwell, saying she would settle for a salad. But the situation worsened when Connor, with a smile that now seemed cruel to her, said the words that froze her. "Oh, I forgot to mention, I thought we'd go Dutch. That way you prove you're an independent modern woman." Emma felt the world collapse. Going Dutch meant everyone paid for themselves, and she didn't even have money for the water she had already drunk. Panic began to mount as she desperately searched for a way out of this situation without making a terrible impression. At the next table, Alexander Blake was dining alone reading documents. At 30, he was the CEO of Blake Tech, a technology company he had inherited from his father and transformed into one of the European giants in the sector. He had heard the entire conversation, and, despite being used to business intrigue, what he had seen disgusted him. He immediately recognized the dynamic: a rich boy setting a trap for a girl clearly in financial difficulty, probably for sadistic entertainment. Alexander had seen too many power games not to recognize them. Emma was still looking for an excuse to leave when something incredible happened. The waiter approached their table with a professional smile and addressed Connor with these words that changed everything. "Excuse me, sir, but the gentleman at the next table would like to offer dinner to you and the young lady. He has already settled the bill." Connor turned confused toward Alexander, who slightly raised his glass in a courteous greeting. Emma looked at him incredulously, seeing for the first time the face of the man who had saved her from the greatest humiliation of her life. Alexander Blake had just made the first move in a game that none of the three yet knew how it would end. Emma looked at Alexander Blake as if he had appeared from nowhere to save her. He was an elegant man, about 30, with dark hair carefully styled, and dressed in a suit that exuded class without being flashy. But it was his eyes that struck her most. Kind but decisive, as if he was used to making important decisions without hesitation. Connor, for his part, was visibly irritated. His plan to embarrass Emma had failed, and now he found himself in the uncomfortable position of having to accept a stranger's generosity. He tried to refuse the offer with false courtesy, but Alexander had already spoken with the restaurant manager, and the bill had been settled. Emma didn't know how to behave. On one hand, she was immensely grateful. On the other, she felt humiliated for needing help. When Alexander got up to leave, she did something impulsive. She excused herself from Connor and ran after the man who had saved her. She caught up with him outside the restaurant, where Alexander was waiting for his car. Emma approached with her heart beating fast, not knowing what to say. When she finally spoke, the words came out spontaneous and sincere. She felt the need to thank him personally, but especially to let him know that she wasn't the type of person who usually had dinner paid for by strangers. Alexander smiled for the first time that evening, a warm smile that lit up his serious face. He told her he had done what anyone with a shred of decency would have done, seeing a girl in trouble and a guy who enjoyed embarrassing her. The conversation that followed lasted only a few minutes, but was intense. Emma briefly told him about her situation. Working student, humble family background, dream of graduating and finding a job that would allow her to help her mother. Alexander listened without interrupting, struck by her honesty and the determination that came through her words. When Alexander's car arrived, a black BMW with driver, Emma understood she was dealing with someone very important. But Alexander behaved with the same simplicity as before, saying goodbye with a "good luck with your studies" that seemed sincere. Emma went home that evening with her head full of questions. Who was that man? Why had he helped her? And why, despite the embarrassment of the situation, did she feel like she had met someone special? The following days were strange. Connor didn't contact her anymore, probably offended by how the evening had ended. Emma was relieved, but couldn't stop thinking about Alexander. He had something that went beyond obvious elegance and wealth, an authentic kindness that had nothing to do with money. A week later, while Emma was working her evening shift at the pizza place, something unexpected happened. A man in a suit entered the place and asked for her. It was Marcus, Alexander's assistant, who brought her a message from his employer. Alexander wanted to meet her again, but this time not by chance. He had a proposal that could change her life. Emma accepted the appointment, curious but also scared. What could such an important man want from her? The next day they met in a quiet cafe near the university. Alexander arrived early, and when he saw Emma enter, he stood up to greet her with the same courtesy as the first time. But this time, there was something different in his attitude. He seemed more relaxed, as if he was genuinely interested in getting to know her. The conversation began with light topics: Emma's studies, her future plans, the difficulties of balancing work and university. Alexander listened attentively, asking intelligent questions that showed his genuine interest. Then came the proposal Emma didn't expect. Alexander offered her an internship at his company, paid and with hours compatible with university. It wasn't charity, he clarified immediately. He had read her undergraduate thesis on emerging markets and found it brilliant. He needed fresh young minds in his company, and she had exactly the profile he was looking for. Emma was speechless. It was too good to be true. An internship at Blake Tech was any economics student's dream. But part of her wondered if there was an ulterior motive. Alexander seemed to read her thoughts. He told her he understood her doubts, but that his offer was purely professional. If she accepted, she would have to prove she deserved the position through work and results, just like any other employee. Emma accepted, and that decision changed everything. She didn't yet know that Alexander Blake wasn't just a successful CEO, but a man who had recognized in her something beyond intelligence, a strength of character and determination that he himself had had to develop to survive in the ruthless world of business. She was about to begin a journey that would take them much further than either could imagine. Emma's first day at Blake Tech was overwhelming. The company occupied 3 floors of a skyscraper in Manhattan, with modern offices and a view of the city. Emma, in her suit bought at a thrift store, felt out of place among employees who wore designer clothing and talked about million-dollar projects. Alexander welcomed her personally, introducing her as an intern for the International Market Development Department. Emma noticed how everyone treated him with respect. He was a natural leader, but with her he maintained the kind attitude from their first meeting. The work was challenging but stimulating. She had to analyze market data, prepare reports on emerging countries, participate in international meetings. The first days were difficult. She worked late, studied at night, slept little. Alexander watched her from a distance, noting her dedication and intelligence. He saw how colleagues gradually accepted her, impressed by her work. But he also noticed signs of fatigue, dark circles, constant tension. One evening, while Emma was still in the office at 9, Alexander intervened. He found her surrounded by papers and charts, with a cup of cold coffee. He sat across from her not as CEO, but as someone concerned for her well-being.
Enjoying the story? Give it a little like, and don't forget to subscribe. Now then, let's carry on.
Emma confessed her fears. She was afraid of not being up to par, of losing that incredible opportunity. Alexander listened, then shared something personal. He told her about his difficult early years running the company, when he had felt inadequate and under pressure. That evening he invited her to dinner at a quiet restaurant. During dinner, Emma discovered Alexander's human side, less formal, more spontaneous. He talked about his hobbies, asked about her family and dreams. He was intelligent and ambitious, but also lonely. The evening ended with Alexander driving her home. Elena realized something was changing between them. It was no longer just a professional relationship. In the following days, Alexander began involving her in more important projects, treating her as a trusted collaborator. Emma felt more confident and contributed innovative ideas. But most importantly, they began getting to know each other as people through conversations, glances, and moments of complicity. Emma realized she had fallen in love with her boss. Alexander struggled with feelings he hadn't experienced in years. The desire to share his life with someone who loved him for who he was. Something was about to happen that would test them both. 3 months after the internship began, Emma had become a fundamental element of the team. Her work on emerging markets had helped close 2 important contracts, and Alexander had begun involving her in strategic decisions. But their relationship was becoming complicated. Colleagues had begun noticing the special attention Alexander paid to Emma. Some whispered that her rapid rise didn't depend solely on professional abilities. Emma heard these whispers and suffered, fearing her work would be diminished. The situation precipitated during a meeting with international investors. Emma had prepared a presentation on Asian markets, but Mark Ferretti, the vice president who had never accepted her arrival, deliberately put her in difficulty with technical questions in front of clients. Alexander intervened, supporting Emma's arguments. The presentation was successful and contracts were signed. But after the meeting, Ferretti approached Alexander with poisonous insinuations. He was losing objectivity. The company was being seen as a place where personal recommendations mattered more than merit. Alexander reacted coldly, but the words had hit their mark. His feelings for Emma were influencing professional decisions. That evening, he made a painful decision. He called Emma to his office and told her the internship would end earlier than planned. He had received a job offer for her from another important company. Emma understood it wasn't the whole truth. When she asked directly if there was something else, Alexander confessed that their relationship was becoming too personal, affecting the work environment. Emma confessed she had fallen in love with him, but had always kept feelings and work separate. Alexander remained silent, then admitted having the same feelings. But precisely for this reason, he had to let her go. The next day, Emma discovered the offer was real. It came from Tesla. Alexander had personally recommended Emma based solely on her professional merits, choosing her well-being over his own interests. It was the last act of love from a man who had sacrificed his own happiness to ensure the independent future of the woman he loved. Emma's first months at Tesla were intense and rewarding. She worked in international marketing, developing strategies for emerging markets. Her boss was impressed by her skills and Alexander Blake's recommendation. Emma threw herself into work without emotional tensions, knowing she was there on her merits. But she missed Alexander terribly, not just as the man she had fallen in love with, but as mentor and friend. Alexander experienced the separation even more painfully. Emma's office had remained empty for weeks, and every time he passed by, he remembered shared moments. 6 months after the separation, fate brought them together again at a globalization conference. Emma represented Tesla. Alexander was the keynote speaker. When they saw each other in the hotel lobby, both felt the same emotional shock as their first meeting. That evening, Alexander invited Emma to dinner. This time, there were no work relationships to complicate the situation. They were a man and woman who had fallen in love in the wrong circumstances and now had the opportunity to freely explore their feelings. The dinner was magical. Alexander confessed he had thought about Emma every day, had followed her career from afar. Emma told him that the decision to let her go had been painful, but right, and that this gesture had made her fall in love even more. When Alexander asked for a second chance, Emma accepted with one condition. Their relationship had to remain separate from work. Alessandro proposed something even more ambitious. He wanted Emma to continue growing at Tesla while they built something personal and lasting together. 1 year after their first official date, Alexander proposed marriage in the Queen's Pizza place where Emma had worked during university. The place where it all began, when a girl with $5 had met the man who would change her life. 2 years after the wedding, Emma and Alexander had proven that true love can coexist with professional success without compromising either. Emma had become Tesla's director of international marketing, the youngest woman to hold that role in the company's history. Alexander had expanded Blake Tech to 3 new continents, confirming himself as one of the most brilliant CEOs of his generation. But their greatest success was the family they had built together. They lived in an elegant but welcoming house in the Hamptons, where Emma had set up a study to work from home when necessary, and Alexander had his private office for evenings dedicated to important projects. Their daily routine was a perfect balance between professional ambition and family intimacy. Every morning they had breakfast together, discussing their respective commitments, but also personal projects. Emma had begun writing a book on marketing strategies in emerging markets, while Alexander dedicated himself to charitable initiatives for young entrepreneurs without resources. Their love had grown and matured through professional and personal challenges. They supported each other in difficult moments, celebrated successes together, and most importantly, had learned that mutual respect is the foundation of any lasting relationship. One spring evening, while sitting in their garden watching the sunset over the city, Emma made an announcement that made Alexander the happiest man in the world. They were expecting their first child. The news came at a perfect time in their lives. Both had achieved professional stability, had a solid and happy marriage, and felt ready for the next step. Alexander embraced Emma with a tenderness she had never seen, whispering that he couldn't wait to raise a child with her. In the months that followed, Emma's pregnancy was followed with meticulous care by Alexander, who proved to be the most anxious and caring expectant father in the world. He reorganized his commitments to always be present at medical appointments, transformed one of the house's rooms into a perfect nursery, and began reading every book on parenting he could find. Emma continued working until the 8th month, proving that a woman can be both a successful professional and a happy expectant mother. Her colleagues at Tesla supported her completely, and she became a role model for young women wanting to balance career and motherhood. When little Michael was born, Alexander cried with joy, holding him for the first time. Looking at his wife, who smiled tired but radiantly happy, and his son sleeping peacefully, he realized he had achieved a fulfillment that went far beyond any professional success. Emma, for her part, discovered that motherhood hadn't diminished her ambition, but enriched it with a new dimension. She wanted to be an example for Michael, show him that any dream can be realized with commitment and determination, but also that family is life's most important value. 6 months after Michael's birth, Emma and Alexander made a decision that surprised all their colleagues. They decided to launch together a foundation to support young women from disadvantaged families who wanted to study economics and business. The foundation would offer scholarships, mentoring programs, and internship opportunities at the best American companies. The idea was born from the memory of that evening at the restaurant, when Emma had almost had to give up dinner for lack of money. They wanted no girl with talent and ambition to ever find herself in a similar situation, and for all to have the opportunity to realize their dreams, regardless of their economic starting conditions. The New Opportunities Foundation quickly became one of America's most respected philanthropic projects. Emma handled candidate selection and training programs, while Alexander used his network of contacts to create concrete job opportunities. In a moving ceremony, the first scholarship was awarded to an 18-year-old girl who reminded them very much of Emma at her age, intelligent, determined, but without economic resources to afford her dream university. When the girl thanked Emma with tears in her eyes, both understood they were creating a virtuous cycle that would change many lives. That evening, returning home after the ceremony, Alexander told Emma something that perfectly summarized their journey. He reminded her that everything had started with an act of kindness in a restaurant, when a man had decided to help a girl in trouble without expecting anything in return. Now they were doing the same thing on a larger scale, helping other girls realize their dreams. But most importantly, they had proven that true love is born when two people recognize and respect each other for who they truly are, beyond appearances and social differences. Emma looked at Alexander gently rocking Michael, then looked out the window at New York City, shining in the night. She thought about the girl she had been, with $5 in her pocket and so much fear of making a bad impression. And she thought about the woman she had become, happy wife, proud mother, successful professional, and above all, someone who had found a way to give back to the world part of the fortune she had received. Sometimes $5 and a chance meeting are enough to change the course of a life. And sometimes the most beautiful love is born just when you least expect it, at the moment when you most need someone to believe in you. Like if you believe kindness can change a life. Comment which moment of the story touched you most. Share to inspire those who still believe in true love. Subscribe for more stories of success and second chances. Sometimes a gesture of generosity opens the door to destiny. Sometimes the person who saves you from embarrassment becomes the love of your life. And sometimes the most beautiful stories begin when you have only $5 in your pocket, but a heart full of dreams. Because true success isn't measured only in money, but in love, respect, and opportunities we know how to create for others.